Well, hello, creatives, community, and kind folks out there. Welcome to the channel. This is RPG with DBJ, and I am your host, DBJ, and we have a special Creators Conclave episode for you. Please introduce yourself there, Tim.
I am Tim Carney. I am part of a YouTube channel called Tabletop Terrors, and I'm also one of the founding partners of the publisher, the indie tabletop publisher, Absolute Tabletop. And it is awesome to be here. That music is the best way to get jazzed up this early in the morning. I loved it.
Yeah.
It's epic.
Yeah, and again, thank you so much for being here so early. This show starts at a god-awful time here in the States, and a lot of the people that watch the show are overseas, just because it's time frame-wise, it's better for them. So I really appreciate you here coming in.
Absolutely. No, this is fantastic. It worked out perfectly. I was already going to be up at this time, and when you asked me, hey, these are the days and times I'm available, I was like, that actually is perfect. Similarly, for the reasons that you were mentioning, before we were recording, which is this is the best way for me to fit it in and make it happen immediately. So I'm happy to do it. Genuinely a joy.
All right. Now, for the people who are longtime viewers of the show, and of course for the education of those who are finding the show, you will know that this show, in our day, each day, Monday through Friday, will take a small subject, maybe kind of innocuous, and take it and expand it out. This whole show is dedicated to deep diving. But Tim, I would like you to give us the elevator pitch of your product, A Deadman's Guide to Dragongrin, and then we'll get into why I really wanted to talk to you. So please, take it away.
So, on the lore side, A Deadman's Guide to Dragongrin is a campaign setting guide where evil has won. And so that's the whole point. The point is that it's difficult to be a hero in the world. But where it gets a little different from the meta and the product side is that we decided that we weren't going to make a dusty tome of lore that you had to memorize to run games in our world, but instead give you an atlas of inspiration with these pillars that we define clearly, but then purposefully build in flexibility in the world without sacrificing any sort of clarity, and give that to you, the game master, and specifically canonically say, we want you to make your own Dragongrin. This has nothing to do with what we want to write. It has to do with us giving you like the half of the information, leaving the rest up to you to fill in, but never, ever, ever in the book does there feel like there's an unfinished blank space. All the space is very purposeful. That's what we wanted to do, so that's what we did. And the thing is 454 pages of just pure inspiration.
Now, okay, when it comes to the page count, 450 pages, it sounds like a tome of information.
Yes.
Right? And it can be a very large slice of cake for somebody to swallow down. All
Sure.
Right? On the surface. But it made me, as I was paging through it, and it made me go back to some of the other games that I've really liked, the lore, the way it was designed. And there was like a theme running through all of the games, the other settings that I liked as well. And some of the themes that really hit me. And I really wanted to talk to you about how you were able to get across a ton of information in the most pleasant manner.
Sure.
And
sure.
the most digestible manner as well. And that is that it seemed like you very clearly put in as much variability for myself as a consumer and a game master as possible in this large large tome of information. It basically as many dials as I could turn, you gave us, and so I wanted to talk to you about that. Like, what is the philosophy you came up with, and why did you do it?
Sure. Well, our whole deal at Absolute Tabletop is we make what we'd use. And so I couldn't find a campaign setting guide that I actually sat down and when I started to read, there was this huge gap, and it seems really strange. And it seems like, well, I don't know, it's just weird. If you pick up any campaign setting guide, most of them, 9 out of 10 of them, are just information. And as cool as it is, none of it's gameable. So, right? So it was more just like learning a history book, and I thought, there's got to be a better way. So let me tell you the secret to A Dead Man's Guide to Dragongrin, and it's a very simple one. As big as it is, the secret is that every section is completely modular. So I could pull it out of the book, and you'd never know. But if I leave it in the book, so like in the middle, we have these things called the Dominions of Ash, which are all these different regions. DBJ, there are 11 of these things, and they feel like their own campaign setting. They're all these little micro places where it's like there's a kind of Viking-y world, and there's kind of a blasted Mad Max situation going on. That's how we did it. We were like, if we make all of this stuff purely module, but follow the same theme under an umbrella, then that's why it won't feel like dense cake. You could flip to anywhere, and it's its own living thing. You don't have to read chapter 1 necessarily to understand chapter 10. It just makes it better, if that makes sense. And that was our whole thing, is keep it modular. And we also snuck in a bunch of extra stuff that was like, hey, we've always wanted a travel system. So we built a little travel system in there, and it's super light and it's super narrative. We built in a little crafting system, and it's not bookkeepy. It's just fun enough, and it's just gameable enough. So that's the trick, is we made it all modular, and that's how it's basically 454 pages of Swiss Army knives that you could just pull out like building blocks and use in your world.
Cool. You know, what I found, and this is just a pet peeve of mine, and I guarantee you I'm not the only, tabletop role player out there in the world where this is a pet peeve. And the pet peeve is this, not about your product, but this is just in general.
Sure.
And there's a little phrase I came up with, the canon, where
Sure.
where there are people who come to the game who have a vast knowledge of the intellectual property, right?
Sure.
And you can Harry Potter, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, it goes on and on, Cthulhu, whatever the case may be. And they will use the canon, the information, as a canon in a game to try to blow up the story the person's trying to tell. It's the game master has this great story, and they're weaving this intricate story on this desert planet, and says something like, yes, and the sun gets ready to set on Tatooine or whatever. And the person's like, well, there's not one sun, there's two, and blah, blah, blah. And then starts going through how episodes and the legends and lore and blah, 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 and it's an eye-rolling thing, right? It's, hey, guys, let's play Warhammer. And everyone goes, okay, sure. And then there's like a 45-minute dissertation from the game master or player as to what's in the lore, what isn't. And not only do I find it disruptive, that's a behavioral thing by a person, but I think as players and game masters that aren't as knowledgeable, they come into it and they're just rolling their eyes like, shit, how much information do I have to scarf down and decipher before I can actually enjoy this thing that I want to do, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, Red Dice Diaries laughs and says, if you get someone like that, I just say, not my version, and move on.
Yep.
But again, then you got to do the session 0, and then you have the person who loves the lore and the canon, who's folding their arms like, well, this isn't the way it's supposed to be, but I'm just going to suck it up, right? And what I loved about getting back to Dead Man's Guide is that you put in the lore, but since there's so many ways for people to change it, and also because things aren't locked in, just by the title of the book, there's like this unreliable narrator through line. Yes. And I love that because a player could play in this world using only this book with 5 different game masters, and the information would be, the way it's presented would be different,
Yeah.
but it's all canonical, right?
Yes. Yep.
So
And we actually did that in the book. So just to give you a quick, the big bad of the world is called the Dismembered Lord. And so one of the things we did was, it's funny, the canon, we actually broke it. This is going to sound funny. We broke the canon canonically. And here's what I mean. If you have the book on page 441, and that's a version 1.2 right now, there's a breakout box, and it says infinite timelines, infinite shadows. And so I'll give you the real quick boilerplate, which is the Dismembered Lord is a chrono lich. I won't spoil anything, but the idea is that he steals days. He basically takes other people's timelines to build his own. So here's basically what it says. It says the Crucible, which is this machine he uses, like this heat map, it basically talks about how it foresees countless timelines and that they all exist in their own fully functioning entities. And so what it says is there are, and this is canonical, there are innumerable versions of Dragongrin, each believing that they are the most important one. So canonically speaking, this book was designed with the idea that each game master's specific version of Dragongrin is a unique timeline that fully and formally exists. For every new Dragongrin created by a gaming group, a new timeline is forged in the cosmos. So we are saying every game master's Dragongrin is real, it's canonical, and it's part of the mythos.
that's, I love that. It. It seems like I'm sure, you know, in hindsight, it seems like a simple thing, but I love I love that so much, and I absolutely love the fact that a player could, you know, be in multiple individuals' games, and, and different things could happen. And I suppose if someone really wanted to be kind of unique, they could actually weave the lives of their characters through different timelines.
Precisely.
You know, like, well, in this world, he's probably a little richer, and he's not a paladin in this world. He's a rogue in this world. It's the same person, same personality.
Exactly. And that's honestly what we wanted to go for, was the ability to say, hey, I want to play with you and your Dragongrin, but not make it weird and make it like, oh, cool, who am I in your Dragongrin? Oh, how are things? You know, we talked about the page count of this book. We wrote too much, which is funny. So the idea, we wrote over, it was 425,000 words, which is crazy. And that didn't even fit into this book. So there's actually something that we'll be releasing eventually. It's called Wielding the Shadows. We had to cut it from the book, but it's basically about an 80-page document just giving game masters tips and tricks of what we put in the world and why, with meta information of why it's there and kind of like what it's supposed to serve, and with plot hooks and stuff. So hopefully you'll see something like that by the end of the year, but it's just, again, giving game masters breakout boxes and ideas of how to break the lore and change it, why it was made, and how they can bend it to their own gameplay style.
Yeah. In the chat, I gotta agree with Mr. S. Like, what an elegant and simple solution, and I absolutely agree with that. It's just the way, how the density of the information you gave out, but the ease in using it. Like for example, there a random culture in your world. I want you to describe how you've divided like the races and the cultures and things like that. But for example, you gave like a chart, a table where I could pick my own titles for the various representatives, or I could pick my own clothing styles or weaponry or things like that. And what I love about that is the fact that while the information is dense, there's also enough variability that maybe in my particular world, it's more, I want it, my mind has a certain feel for it. And so you've given me basically permission to change things.
Absolutely.
So that when the players come across it, I don't feel like if a player read the entire book, memorized it, and says, "You're doing it wrong," it's like, no, maybe you just, maybe someone told you this is what it was, or maybe you
Sure.
visited this location, but when you returned, you're just, your memory's a little foggy. Maybe things have changed since the last
Yep.
time your character was there. And I love unreliable narrators because an unreliable narrator can absolutely positively believe everything they're saying and still be wrong.
Sure.
So I love that. So
And so I just, if I can, I want to tell all of your listeners and viewers right now that one of the things that we decided to do, and we're kind of trying to spread the word, if you go to absolutetabletop.com right now, all of the character creation stuff is 100% free. All you have to do is make an account and you can download it. It's 75 pages, full color. It's directly from the book. It gives you part of the world setting. There's more. We kind of cut it short so it wasn't too much, but there's the world stuff and all of the heritage and culture stuff you're talking about. So if you want to know what DBJ is talking about, go to absolutetabletop.com. It's the character creation kit. It's got a brown cover and it's 100% free. 75 pages and it's full color, full quality. You get everything. So that's the first thing I was going to say. Now, there are other things included in the book, like we have class stuff that's not included in it. So you have your heritage and cultures is what you were talking about. So the way we divided this up is something that I've always wanted. So no longer is it elf, high elf. And it's like, oh, hey, you are your race. I mean, that's kind of silly. And we let fantasy get away with it. But I'm like, it's been too long. So now we have heritage, which is your sort of your race, and then your culture. So there's not just, oh, dwarves are the people that live in the mountains. No, a dwarf can be any of the 11 different cultures, and they're very distinct. I'm very proud of how we were able to represent all these cultures. And so that's how we split it up. And so in the section, and to kind of hit on what you said, there's bullet points of what do they believe. Now, name a culture that all believes the same thing. It doesn't happen, right? So in this case, I'll use this example culture, the Ardor. They were the ones who kind of came up against the big bad and lost. So now they're drudges. They're basically, imprisoned and they must work for the bad guy. So some feel that they were divinely ordained to do that and that they're supposed to, rise again. Others say they were fools, and this is in the book. Another bullet point is others say they were fools, acting out of corruption and got what they deserved. And then yet most Ardor believe that while it's cruel and unjust, they still have to rise up and overthrow their oppressors. So they're more faithful than ever. You as a player can decide where you fall in there, but you as a game master can have the characters run into people who believe, and I made sure that you were equipped with the different viewpoints so that you're not just running into this 2D trope anytime you run into an Ardor. You know what I mean? Like, I love Star Trek and I love the Klingons, but there's not a ton of depth in the old stuff. So this is like giving you every side of the Ardor, every side of the Granach Thane, and etc. So check out that free character creation kit. We would love to see the characters that everybody comes up with.
Yeah. Now, Red Dice Diary says, would you say that this guide adopts a more toolbox approach to setting creation?
Absolutely. Absolutely. But we never shy away from giving you what you need. So our goal was there's never confusion. We never shy away from telling you what we think it should be. Hey, this is what we designed it. But with every turn of the page, there's permission to change it and the idea that you're supposed to change it. So yeah, but absolutely, it's a very, very toolbox kind of world building setting.
Right. And excuse me, and even considering the way you design character creation, the side effect of character creation for a game master is that, and listen, I've been doing this over 40 years now, and you know what? Players go into a town. I'm not prepared. They meet an NPC, and I'm like, I give the long F. It's like, oh my god, what are they wearing? What do they look like? What's his name? What's the person? Blah blah. And I'm like, oh, really, guys? Really?
Yeah.
You know I'm not prepared for this, right? What I love about the side effect of having like of let's go back to WotC's backgrounds are they have like the ideals, the flaws, the bonds. Is that as a game master, I can very easily use that to make up an NPC.
Sure.
Right? Oh, what's the acolyte background or the hermit background? What's the hermit
Yep.
like? Okay, I'll just pick from that. Okay, quick, boom, done it. Okay. And then, sorry. Thank you, Deadman. Deadman posted in the Discord the link to a Deadman's Guide to Dragongrin, the character creation kit. And by the way,
That is perfect.
Yep. And by the way, I did put all the links below in the video on YouTube. It's not on Twitch, but I will eventually do that. So after we air. But getting back to this, and again, thank you, Deadman. The idea that you've both separated the cultures and the legacies, to me, gives me as the game master, like, oh, thank you. Now I know what this person is like, very quickly, very easily, on the fly, and again having those basically the dials I can turn, and like I mentioned before we went live, Adam Coble. If you ever hear about his design philosophy, he's always like, "Hey, listen, random tables are lore. Random tables are canon. You put a number of things in a random table, and it tells the person reading it what the world's like, what the game philosophy is like, what the information is, in a very compact, simple method. Even if you never roll a die, which I tend not to roll on random tables." But I love them nonetheless. They're like,
Sure.
they're like my little bites of, bites of goodness. Like, oh, what's this game about? Flip the random table, read it. Oh, okay, I get it.
Oh, it's about that. Yeah. And one of the things, so the other thing too is that you have, and this is of course just a basic overview, but every one of the cultures has that whole list of like outlooks on other cultures, which can be really helpful. So like the whole Mir, the sort of Viking-y people, if they're looking at those Ardor we were talking about, they might think, well, we're different folk, but we share a common history. The forging and falling of an empire, the past ought to be respected as we look to the future. So that's just a cue. If you're playing a whole Mir and you run into an Ardor, you can look on your little chart of like and again, it's just inspiration. It's not canon. So yeah, we really tried to add in a bunch of those tables you're talking about, like title generators. Like rather than saying, here's a list of last names, it's more like, for instance, those Viking people. You generate a title and it's a 2d20. So it's like it could be, Ale Slayer or Foul Teller or Grin Render or Shield Singer, whatever it is. And it's really supposed to just be super inspirational.
Yeah. In over on Twitch, Red Dice says all about that random table life. Great for inspiration. Although I'm picturing him throwing up Dead Man's Guide gang signs, I guess. but
DMG. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. But the again, for those who don't know, I need to let everyone know who is watching and will watch or listen in, that you and James and the other guys designed a Dead Man's Guide to Dragongrin basically in public live over the last minimum 2 years?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so listen, I'll cop to it, especially now that it's out there and I can point to it. We were getting ready, we're getting ready to deliver our Kickstarter. We're about 6 months out. And I'm reading the book and I'm like, this isn't what it should be. It's close. It's halfway there. It's about halfway there. But the customization, just because by nature of how I was as a game master, as much as I wanted this stuff to be flexible, it wasn't as flexible as I wanted it to be. I didn't have the capability to write it that way first. So the first drafts were fine, but they were kind of like other campaign settings, where it's like, here, this is how it is, learn this. So what we did was we were like, hey, this is going to be a big deal. But what we're going to do is we're going to tell the backers we're going to be late because we need to break this concrete into pieces and add this other separate layer of movability. And so we basically said, here's what we're going to do. And so we told the backers, hey, we're going to be late. And we laid out a very specific schedule of what and why. We stuck to that schedule religiously. So it was late, but now it's like, what I hope is that people see and say, okay, okay, and to keep the backers so that they were like not losing faith that we took their money and weren't ever going to deliver, which unfortunately happens. Yeah. We were releasing all the writing that we were doing every month, like thousands and thousands of words, just as blank, sort of stripped down PDFs. We called it Dragongrin Dismantled, and we were like, look, we're working. We promise. Here's what we said we were going to do. And we would deliver, 10, 20,000 words of content every month minimum, so that people knew, and we're like, no, well, we're going to get the artist to redraw this now because it's different, and we're going to get this new map. And so, yeah, it was very public. It was a very tough choice, but we all agreed that it was better to deliver the product we were envisioning, this really kind of like reaching, spanning new thing, and be late than it was to deliver something. And I'll end that thought with this quote. There's a game designer who said, a late product will eventually be good, but a bad product is bad forever. And I thought, you know what? I'd rather have the late product and push it.
Yeah, that is awesome. I agree with Mr. S in the chat says, gotta respect that integrity. The wait was definitely worth it. That's
thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that because there's value in getting it right versus value in getting it quickly. And
agreed.
And so and actually just the simple fact that not only were you releasing, tens of thousands of words at a time, but the fact that you let people see you stumbling and falling and getting back up again during the design process, at least from the very beginning. And it can be kind of hard. I can't imagine how it felt to say, hold tight to a piece of something you thought was immutable and then let it go later on during the design process.
Very hard.
Very hard. So how did you do that and then do that in public?
Man, it was really tough. And there were some people who, and I understand. So going into this, statistically speaking, we were going to fail. So I have no problem with the naysayers on Kickstarter, the vocal minority who were pretty brutal. When we said we were going to be late, there were at least 2 or 3 people who immediately said publicly, not to us, but just like, all right, fine, this project isn't happening. We get it. I'll never buy anything from this company again. And that's hard, but the truth is that there's 2 separate types of information. There's information that is designed for me to give you and you're supposed to learn it. And then there's information that's supposed to be inspirational. And as basic as it sounds, if anything was not inspirational, then it was the wrong information. So what I'd have to do is, so everything that we put in the book was, okay, cool, so what's it going to be at the table? There were 2 main design philosophies that we adhered to that we ran everything through. And you'll notice this about the book. The first one is the past is not allowed to be mentioned unless it is affecting the present. By doing that alone, you cut the 500-page bloat of all the learning. Like if you look, and a couple of reviewers have mentioned this, the quote-unquote timeline is maybe 200 words. It's like, it just gives you the boilerplate because we said if the past doesn't affect the present, you're not allowed to mention it. So that was the first thing. And then the second thing is that every fact has to push the game master toward finding their own truth. Or every fact has to basically ask a question also. So by thinking of it that way, what we did was we never gave you what happens. We gave you what is, and then you decide what happens. So like as an NPC, we would say, here's what their goal is, and here's what here are their desires, and here's kind of their personality. And then we would say, okay, you tell us, what do they do? What do they want? What do they do with it? And so we always made sure not to go what most world building books do. They go 3/4 or 7/8 way there, and you have to then memorize it. What we did is we took you halfway there using only the important stuff and said, all right, that's stable. Now you build the other half.
It boggles my mind today that that's not the way things have been designed already. right? Like, for me, I've always felt like when I read the lore, even if it's well written, when I read the lore of certain game settings, that I'm always looking as a not just a reader but a tabletop person. Where do I fit in to this world?
Yeah.
Where's the space for me to tell my stories? I using the analogy of a real sandbox, right? It does have a boundary. Maybe you have a couple of toys in there and a little sandbox and things like that.
Sure.
But I want to be able to play in it. And if I get there and someone tells me, well, you can only use the scoop, to put the sand in the bucket. And by the way, the little starfish remains where it is. Don't touch it. And you're like, wait, what? Like,
Yeah,
I'm going to take my football and go home, And and so what I really love about it is that, strangely enough, even the way I feel, my mind might change on my outlook of the setting. And you've given me the tools to use. You've given me the fidget spinner.
Yes. Oh my God, I love that.
On each page, like,
I love that.
It's like, what's this thing? And maybe the game happens 3 weeks later, and I go, you know what? I think I'm going to change it again. I think I'm going to.
Yes.
They meet someone on the road, and they're
Yep.
not exactly the way they pictured the people in the city, so maybe this might throw them off a little bit. But really, this might be like you said, the value of inspiration, I think sometimes is not, it's very difficult to figure out what the monetization of it is when it comes to tabletop gaming, because so many people will, when we talk online and all our social media, where do you get your inspiration from? Who do you read? What do you watch? Where do you, and if you buy a book, you want to be able to go back to that book, and if it keeps inspiring you again and again, to me, I feel like the value is constantly renewing itself. Wow,
Yes.
I opened up the book again, and I wasn't even thinking about that. But an example is what's happening today. We're all stuck in our homes, and there's Corona, COVID-19 everywhere, and we're all worried. And so now people are inspired to think of new ways in doing things. And so I feel like the book is kind of doing the same thing. It's inspiring me to go, oh, I didn't think about that. Maybe I'll use this. Or, maybe there's something that I read over and it glanced right through my head. And then a month later, I go back to it and I say, you know what, that's a really good idea. Maybe I will use that dial in my game,
Yeah, and so I think something that's really important, and it's like to put an explicit point to it, is this. I think most current modern game masters and players agree that what role playing is collaborative storytelling, right? I mean, that seems like a pretty universal truth, right? So that is the main difference. If you had to distill it down to one thing that we did differently, is that most creators, and I love them, they forget that their setting is supposed to be collaborative. And as weird as that sounds, the point is that, DBJ and anybody else who takes this book, I'm just one person in the collaborative process. And so a lot of creators, they're writing stories, they're writing novels, and what they're enamored with is telling this particular thing, this three act structure. Yeah, like where they're like, okay, here's the beginning, the middle, and the end, and then they hand you a finished story, and it's not as engaging. And so I'll give you an example of how we went through this. In the regions, like I said, they're called Dominions of Ash. There's two things that we purposefully gave you in every one to specifically break them. So the first thing is this thing called the ever-growing shadows. And so when you go to a region, there's this sort of lieutenant of the dismembered lord called a Lord of Ash. There's this thing called the ever-growing shadows where you drop one of every die, and it basically tells you the state of power and the state of the region as a game master. So like, how powerful are their armies? How close are they to achieving their goals and all this stuff? So every region is different in that way. It's not, oh, I show up and I know that they're going to do this and they're going to do this. And in the lore, it says that they're going to do this. It's always different. All right. So that's the first thing. I mean, their lair, their foes, the challenges they're facing. So it makes the bad guy dynamic, or the bad girl, it makes them dynamic immediately. Second thing, and this is one of my favorite things about the book, every region has this thing called a countdown to ruin. It's basically an optional list of important events that unfold, and it's like, between 6 and 12 bullets long. The first one is kind of like your campaign starter, but it basically, if the countdown continues to happen, the world ends in almost every case. Like, that region just is obliterated unless the heroes step in, and it's a really good way. You could have whatever side quest going on, whatever you're feeling, and then you have the countdown happen again, and it gives you ideas. These sorts of things will happen. The heroes will notice this sort of stuff because this happened. And what's really cool about that is that eventually they'll either step in or, like I say, in most cases, entire regions are turned into wastelands, or the bad guy turns everyone in the region into vampires. Like, it becomes crazy. So we're like, this is dynamic, and we want you to break it.
I can't tell you how much I love that, dude. I mention it so often on this channel about like tension timers and pressure, and there's a movie term called unfortunately it's the way it's termed. It's slaying your darlings, killing your darlings.
Yeah,
it's too often, like you said, as a novelist, we'll sit down and go, wow, I've got this great idea for anything, steampunk,
sure,
far future, the ancient past or something, and we'll lose sight of the fact that it's collaborative and want to write a novel, as opposed to writing something that is supposed to grow and be dynamic and allow the players to weave throughout the story. And I've often made the complaint that in some settings, there's nothing moving. Meaning, like, the good kingdom is good, and the evil kingdom is evil.
Yep.
And that's about it. There's, like, very little friction. There's no, like, without the conflict, there's no drama. When the players leave a place and come back, it tends to be the same.
Yeah.
It's the same barmaid, it's the same mountains, it's the same farmers. And
yeah.
There never seems to feel like there's... I make a comment that a good world building is if the players don't move in the world should move them if they stay still. If they just put their feet up on a tavern table and drink their their sorrows away, that eventually the world should come knocking on their shoulder like, hey, you need to move, and it could be something as simple as the public is like, which side do you pick? And the players are like, well, I'm non-committal. And how many, in our own lives, people are like, you can't be non-committal.
Right. No, it's true.
You've got to pick a side. Is it us or them? Because if you don't pick my side, you must be against me. And what I'm saying is that I love the way it was designed, because now for example, some people can only play once a month. All right. And they go, all right, guys, man, game master's like, man, I didn't write good notes. I don't remember what happened. Players come back and they're like, I'm feeling something a little different. And it's in a strange way in canon, things may have changed if in the world a month has gone by.
Yes.
Right. Or the players have traveled and they hear news about what happened where they used to be. Or there's rumors about an impending doom, and the player characters are like, what should we do? I don't know. Maybe we should get out of here. And I love the idea of having something looming in the background, because you want to have every tool you can to eliminate analysis paralysis. And I love the fact that you wove it within the setting of the game, that there's always something happening to push actions and reactions forward, and the player characters can either, act and do things to change it, or react and get swept up in the wave of these things happening in the world.
Yeah, and that's a really good way to put it. And you're framing it in a way that I hadn't considered it, because I'm one of those gamers. I play about once a month with a couple of different groups. So I have like 2 different games going at once, but I only play about once a month. That's such a really interesting way to put it. So I'll give you an example. In the world, there's this in Dragongrin, way far off in the east, there's this sort of islandy landmass. And without getting into too much detail, it's sort of got this eldritch theme, and this magical craft has crashed into it. So everything is amplified. Things either grow or die. It's this very strange place. But the way that the kickoff of that countdown to ruin is called the People Rise. And basically there's a rebel force. So the first bullet on there is that this rebel force starts throwing the bad guys' food stores and armaments into the sea. It causes chaos, and they demand these conditions. But the soldiers immediately prepare to retaliate and crush them. So if you have that going on in the background, the players can choose to interact or not. Now, a month goes by, like you say, life happens. Where was I? What was my character doing? Well, now you can go and read the second bullet on this, where there's another faction that notices these tensions and start to sort of see an opportunity to begin nudging history back toward its own vision, and it gives you a couple plot points of how this other faction interacts. It gets everybody sort of on this same track of like, oh wait, now who are these people? Oh no, don't worry, you worry about your quest. Well, no, I want to look into these people. What are they doing, and what happened to the... So it kind of creates this cool, like you say, it's this rallying point, and I hadn't considered that, so that's actually really smart.
It's funny how, like, Red Dice Diary says, it's often the way that the best ideas seem obvious in hindsight, in the fact that choosing to do something again where we kind of think like, well, I wonder why this wasn't done before, and choosing to do it that way sparked something in me to go, oh, that's a great idea. I didn't think about it that way. Or giving me something in the lore that says, how could I change this up? And I don't mean moment by moment, but like,
sure.
How could I change it to fit my own philosophy at the moment? How could I change things so that the player characters always feel like the world's moving and it's alive around them?
Yes.
And so I really like that as a tool to say, I could advance that timeline very quickly, make it week by week, or I could just extend it out as long as I want, or use it as a method like when the players arrive. Okay, here are the rumors you're hearing about. Here are the things happening. And also, how are the NPCs reacting to what's going on? And that could change as well. So I really appreciate that. Now, I kind of went on a little further than I wanted to in terms of getting past one of the other design philosophies, and you were talking about your 3-point. I really want you to describe it.
The lore triangle.
Your lore triangle, yes,
Sure.
please.
Yeah, so and I can show you a couple examples. So in anything that's large enough to be mythical in the book, there is just different viewpoints on it. So we even took this a step further. So where you have, there's this thing in our world called the Bleak. And the Bleak is this festering magical maelstrom. It's like this red storm that's constantly ebbing and flowing and all that stuff, right? So you get a brief history, and this is another thing we tried to do. Anytime you see the word history in the book, in most books, you want to run away. You're like, oh God, here comes the info dump. Okay, here comes the 2 pages that I won't ever use at the table. For us, 3 bullets. Then, now, beyond. So then, the Bleak didn't exist until the end of Lightfall. Here's what happened. Now, here's what it's doing, blah, blah, blah. Beyond, here's what's going to happen if it's not checked, if it's not taken, and, etc. Boom. It's like this big. It's an inch of text. So then we break it into basically, some say, others whisper, many believe. And it's like, some say that the Bleak is a source of arcane power in the world. So others whisper that it's not, and that it's actually, marring the world, and that it's an evil thing. But many believe that whatever you believe about those two things, more eternal evils that slumber between the fabric of the realms are beginning to stir, and we need to get rid of this thing. So it's kind of a nice triangle of people who are like, no, it's good, it's magic, and they're like, no, that's not where magic comes from, it's bad. But most people are saying, yeah, but either way, we should probably consider about getting rid of it. And so by giving a good sampling of the different viewpoints, it makes it so that no one's right. It's just a matter of opinion. And it's so rare that as a game master and a player, you can have differing opinions and it be productive.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the way we did it. You don't have to memorize the lore. You just decide what you believe about it, and that's okay.
You mentioned, I think this was before we went live, that there was some contention between you guys as a designers being non-committal about the lore, and how that choosing to be, okay, maybe non-committal is a harsher word for what you were trying to do.
Yeah, and we got pegged for that. So when I first we had a group of alpha readers, and as we were kind of figuring out some of these prospects and like what we're trying to do, there's a group of people that we would show it to first and say, hey, this is what we're thinking. And almost without a single exception, when we showed the alpha readers, well, no, you can't just say what it might be. You have to say exactly what it is. And so then I said, okay, so that's fair. So explain to me in the real world what we have that's like that. Give me an example of some major event or some major belief where there's a definitive, clear-cut A, B, C, D, all the way through Z, and it tells you what you should know. I said, and then further, take 3 people in a room, ask them the same question about the same topic, even if they all like it, and give me the same answer. It won't happen. So they were like, well, no, I don't. I want to know what you think about the world. And I said, you trust me. I'm not. And so one of the things, and I promise you this, if you pick up this book, it is not confusing. It is not wishy-washy. There is plenty of factual detail, but there's only factual detail with wiggle room, because you can give anybody a fact, but you can't make them believe something about that fact. And so there was quite a bit of pushback at first until we kind of proved ourselves. And by probably the third version of what we were showing the alpha readers, they were like, oh, this actually is pretty cool because I can kind of make it whatever I want, but it still has roots in the pillars of the world. I was like, bingo. But yeah, there was a lot of pushback that we were going to make something that was wishy-washy and confusing. And hopefully, if you get the book, you'll see that that's not the case.
Yeah. Now, this might seem like might come across as a negative comment, but I think you'll understand where this comes from. Shadzar says, when people buy a product, they want it to be a complete design, not half-arsed, basically.
Sure.
But here's, I think what happens is that we may read something as a reader or a novelist, but the way we use it doesn't operate that way at the table.
Sure.
Right? Like, I can read, I'm just going to make an example. Like, I could read Game of Thrones, but it doesn't come across very well until a game is made about it that leaves open spaces, because there are people who've read all the books of Song and Ice and Fire, they know all the lore. And so I think one of the problems when it comes to us as designers, we love our settings and we want to get, it's very personal, right? It's like a magnum opus. Like, I came up with this, so I wanted to look like this and feel like this. So I want my history and my people and my descriptions of the land and the countries and the politics to be a certain way. Sure. The problem is, like you said, 3 people read it and they can read the exact same thing. We see this with all entertainment. They hear the same music, they see the same movie, and they have different opinions when they leave. When it comes to role-playing games, we don't just interact with it once and walk away. We're
Right.
using it at the table. So by bounding our imagination and then having wiggle room on the inside of it, I think gives us the best of both worlds. And it surprised me how much of the best of both worlds it was until I saw it, and I was
Sure.
like, okay, yeah, I get. Oh,
Yeah.
why isn't anyone doing this? You know, and
Yeah.
you know, we have so many settings: Eberron, Dark Sun, Ravenloft, and there are people who know Forgotten Realms. Oh my God, you know, there are Forgotten Realms canonistas out there
Sure.
that know all the people. But if I'm a player, where do I fit in? What do I get to change? Where do I, you know? So I really like that philosophy.
And that's a really good point. So and something I just want to say to make it very clear: if anyone gets this book and you feel like there's not enough solid, definitive information, and if you're not inspired, we absolutely will give you your money back, and you can keep the book. Because I can see how it can sound like, well, hold on, I want to know what's really happening. I promise you, there's plenty of stuff that's definitive, but like I say, in the big mythical sense, or when it comes to belief, you can't. There's no such thing as canonical quantified belief. It's like, so trust me that there's plenty. Like there's in for character creation alone, I think there's 170 pages. There are like 30 new backgrounds. There are 24 new subclasses that are specific to the world. Each class gets a full write-up about how they fit into the world and examples of the culture. So there's tons of stuff for you to sink your teeth into. For the game master, that's where it's flexible. For the player, I promise you it's anchored, it's concrete, and you can just put a nail right in it. So just don't feel like you're going to be walking through this sort of milky world where everything, like the maps, the locations are all set. Like, that stuff's there, but when it comes to the game master and the things that they have, dials and knobs, that's where it gets way more flexible.
All right. We're getting to the end here, getting to the last hour and such.
Sure.
And I would just like you to just I don't know, go off on exactly what a Dead Man's Guide to Dragongrin is, because I think you held back a little bit. Yeah, just tell us like the setting, the themes, the elements
Sure.
that are in it, and because I did highly focus on the customization of it,
Sure,
but
sure.
I think it might be coming across as if it's like you said, it's like wishy-washy vaporware,
Sure.
and it's not at all.
It's not.
very thematic. So please let us know.
Sure. So, evil reigns in the realm of Dragongrin. And so the dismembered lord, he extends his reach, and all of the free lands kneel before him. So he is this dark lord. But the thing about that is that there's this eerie sort of reasoning behind what is allowed and what isn't allowed. Meaning, not all heroes are struck down immediately. So it's like, well, what's going on? Why would the Dark Lord allow this but not allow this? And so the theme is that it's difficult to be a hero, but it's not impossible. And this entire book is an atlas of inspiration. It's brimming with character creation options, but it also has history, lore, and there are tons of customizable options and prep tools to make it modular, but it all is thematic. It all fits in. So you have, like I say, 24 new subclasses, 30 new backgrounds. There are feats and spells compatible with 5e. All of this is, and I should have said this way up front, this is all full-blown compatible with 5e. Absolutely full-blown compatible with 5e. It works back and forth. The heritage and subclass system is very similar to 5e. You have these Dominions of Ash, which is basically 11 small regions that could act as their own campaign settings. They have their own maps, their own specific like plot hooks, generators, characters. But one of the things that we're most proud of in this system are these little things called cruxes. And what cruxes are these little kind of adventure creators that give you NPCs, events, and specifics that you can roll a table and kind of put together your own story with a definitive climax and some aftermath options. So if you take any of these regions, these Dominions of Ash, and you flip to them in the book, as a game master, it has everything you need to run a campaign in Dragongrin, turnkey. Those countdowns to ruin, a couple of those cruxes, character connections, and a bunch of other details. So, and that's not even counting the stat blocks of the monsters in the book that we included, as well as optional tools such as travel. There's an infamy system. There are a couple of crafting systems, one for magic items, one for sort of like these normal items. And then we actually included the Dismembered Lord. Our big bad is statted out in the back of the book, CR30, with a full-blown list of the encounter and how it should progress in 3 massive phases. So if you're looking to play a game in Dragongrin, you absolutely can, and we encourage you to do so. So hopefully that was a little bit better.
That was excellent, and of course, one of the moderators in the Discord, Deadman, he put in the links to the Absolute Tabletop for the both the print and PDF versions and things. So I already put the link in, and thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining me. I know it's a bit early here in the States.
It was a pleasure, man.
Dude, and we haven't been able to really like sit down and like just talk and stuff. You're a busy man. I get it. Just trying. I'm sure getting this book out was like oh my god, I let my baby go. Oh man, like difficult to do, but happy when it happens. And,
so happy.
Yeah, and me, I'm a old grognard. While I love referencing a PDF, I can't wait for the print version.
Sure. Yeah. And that's it, honestly. So, and I'll just kind of end with that, which is we're currently going through, we're proofing it. Everyone's reading it. Obviously in a book that big, there's going to be typos and errors. I mean, even in Wizards of the Coast books. So what we're doing is we're placing more art. We're moving things around. And we hope to, as long as, with the state of the world, of course, with people being shut down and all that, we hope to have the book off to the printer by the end of this month. And so that means you guys will, and girls will hopefully have it by summer. And that's the same thing with anyone who pre-orders now. It's not pre-order, it's pre-ordering physical, but you immediately get a PDF copy that you can dig into in quarantine. So, but I'm with you, man. I can't wait to hold that accomplishment in my own little mitts.
It feels pretty good to feel the physical copy of the thing that you've helped bring to life. I have to admit, I'm a small press publisher myself, and it feels pretty damn good. It's like a shining little beacon, and like, I did that.
I did the thing.
Yeah. And you're never done. It feels like
and no, that's true, and that's where we had to draw some lines. But just to give you guys an idea, and girls, it's going to be about the size of like an Edge of the Empire, so it's going to be like still manageable, but it's going to be. When I gave the page count to one of our the people who were assisting us on the product, he said, and I quote, "Lord, she thick," because it's 454 pages, and we didn't expect that. So it is a very thick book, and you won't be disappointed.
Yeah. Well, so thank you very much, man. And by the way, again, thank you, Deadman, for
Yes.
placing into the in the Twitch and in YouTube and over on Discord. You can help this channel out with sharing, subscribing, following on Twitch. I'd love to become an affiliate and those kind of things. And do me a favor, if you have any questions at all, please check out Tabletop Terrors and Absolute Tabletop. The links are below. You won't be disappointed. Please follow along. And as a matter of fact, if you are someone who has the time to go into the archives, you can actually see the design process of this through actual plays and
Sure.
live chats and things of the design of A Dead Man's Guide to Dragongrin up until today. So if someone wants to go back in time and check that out, of course, there's always entertainment for that as well. So we will be signing off. Do you have any last words here, sir?
Just thank you. This was genuinely awesome. This is a really cool way to start off a Friday.
Thank you. All right, guys, everyone have a great weekend. I will see you Monday. See ya.